and they have an extra assignment to do. So you were wise to come tonight because this will prevent you from having to do an extra assignment. But as I said, I'm going to try to keep this brief. And really the point of our meeting tonight is to prepare you for what is the biggest assignment in this class. It's the biggest assignment across the board. It's the biggest assignment in my face-to-face classes, in my hybrid classes, and in my online classes. Now I know I offered optional meetings throughout the semester and very few people took advantage of that. So I make this one required because I feel like it's really important for me to share some of these things with you. Plus, it gives you a chance to ask me questions so you can feel more prepared moving forward. Now, this speech in the syllabus, it says the length of the speech is 6 minutes. You are allowed up to 8 minutes for this speech, but you cannot exceed 8 minutes without losing points for time. One thing I notice about online students is that you put a lot into the development, and some of you tend to go over sort of consistently throughout the class. So I really want to discourage that, because if you're in a public speaking setting, oftentimes you're only given a few minutes to speak and they expect you to stay within those parameters. Otherwise, you're taking time from another speaker, or you might even fail to finish your presentation because it wasn't prepared to be finished at that time, and you get cut off before you get to that really important piece or to the conclusion that is so important for most of our presentations. So I really want you to be mindful of time. I really want to see you finish between 6 and 8 minutes, and that's really important to be able to do in the course of the class. So it's a good time to do that. So Jasmine asked if any sources are required from the LSSC database, and I'm not requiring you to use sources, but my hope from the database, but I am hoping that because you had a chance to explore what that research is like, you did use them in the informative speech, you see it as a really valuable tool. It's like a one-stop shop. So I know that my favorite source in the database is Opposing Viewpoints. It is an excellent source for a persuasive speech. And if you access Opposing Viewpoints, every time you click a link in there, that is a brand new source. You know it's credible, you know it's reliable, you know it's authoritative, and you can see its currency. You can see that it's current, and so you get, and it also cites the source for you, so that's perfect. So all of the things that you would need that source to be, Opposing Viewpoints is going to offer that, and you only have to go to one place. So while I say no, you don't have to use the database, it is encouraged, and it makes your research so much easier. And I think you'll find that if you get used to a few of those sources, they tend to be your best friend. You do have to have 4 verbal citations for this speech, and they all need to be unique. So you need to go to different sources for each one of those citations. Keep in mind, when you go into Opposing Viewpoints, you're not citing Opposing Viewpoints as the source. You're citing where that information came from, because Opposing Viewpoints gets that information from everywhere and puts it in there. So you should be able to find the actual source of that information. You are welcome. I love when people ask questions, so please, please ask those questions if you've got them. Chances are someone else had the same question, and so it's really helpful when you do. You do have to submit an outline and works cited page at the time of your presentation. So if you submit on Sunday, I really like for you to submit the outline and works cited page at the same time, just because that shows that you did do your homework, you've prepared it in advance, and you submitted it. Now, when I say full sentence outline, we're talking the same outline design we've been building all along. It is a Roman numeral outline, and we're going to talk about that tonight, but it should look very similar to the outlines you've been building all along. And of course, your works cited page should be an MLA or APA citation. I do prefer MLA because I know a lot of you are learning that in your ENC 1101 classes, and I just want to help support that. But if you're a nursing student, sometimes learning APA is really helpful to your trade, and so I'd like to help you in that way as well. So yes, Grayson, you can have sources from the same website, but that doesn't count as one of the 4. So you still need to have 4 sources from distinct, unique places. So you might have 6 sources in your speech, and that's okay. You still want to call attention to all of your research, but you really should have 4 unique sources. So what I mean by that is, while the CDC may have 5 different pages, and you can get information from five different pages. Those aren't going to be unique sources. That's still the Centers for Disease Control, and it's still going to be the same kind of source. So what we're looking for here is a variety of sources, a variety of research. This allows you to kind of highlight multiple viewpoints and get the information from many different places. So your audience can see, wow, they really vary these sources. It really helps eliminate that bias that sometimes comes from maybe just looking at one or two different places. And it really helps to offer a variety of examples to support your information. So yes, you can use your source several times if you need to, but I still want to see 4 different and distinct sources at least built into the development of the speech. I think when we watch the Chili Pepper speech, for instance, this is a good example. I call him Pete Piper because he talks about chili peppers, but he had 7 sources, unique sources, and then he repeated 2 of those sources twice. So we had 9 total oral citations. And while students are like, oh, it's going to seem like so much research, it really doesn't. If you can cite that carefully, if you get comfortable citing that source, you know how to do it, it flows with the body of the speech so well that it just adds some ethos, speaker credibility to your message. And it just adds some depth of detail as well. So feel free to use as many sources as you need, and make sure that you feel comfortable doing that. You do have to have a presentation aid, and I have attached to this room. I don't know exactly how you get it, but you should see an area where you can access attachments if you're not on your phone. If you're on your phone, it may be a little harder, in which case I can send that to you. You just need to shoot me a message in Canvas, and I will send that to you. But there is an attachment included here that explores how you might use presentation aids in a meaningful way. This is one thing I see sort of consistently across the board. When people present in their living rooms, they don't see it as being as real as if they're in a classroom. And if you don't see it as being as real as if you're in a classroom, you're not treating that audience with the care and respect you should be. And that's not taking much away from this class. So if you're going to take the time to take a public speaking class, you should get the most out of the class. And one of those important skill sets is using presentation aids well. And so I really want you to use that well. And so that attachment is going to explore ways that you can do that outside of the scope of sitting your laptop on the dining room table and having people lean in to see it, or passing your phone around, right? That's really hard for them to see. It doesn't treat them with much integrity. It doesn't really treat the visual aid with much integrity, because you're assuming they're not going to see it that well anyways. So I really want to encourage you to take the time to consider your aid. I would much rather see a really valuable visual aid, even if it's just one, right, than have this fantastic slideshow that nobody can really see, that doesn't really add any meaning to your message anyways. So thinking about that, I really want you all to consider that. And the last thing I want to include here is that you can use media. And gosh, who doesn't love, those meaningful PSAs that pull on our heartstrings and sort of make us tear up and make us really want to be a part of the solution. So if you come across a video like that and you want to include that in your message, you are welcome to do that. You can have up to 2 minutes of media, as long as you have 5 minutes of your own spoken speech. The reason why I include that is because I don't want students replacing their speech content with someone else's media. It's just a part of learning to be a public speaker. I really want to give you the time you need to do that. And 5 minutes gives you enough content to really explore and examine the topic. And then the media can be in addition to that. And there's some great ways that you can run media in your living room. So most smart TVs allow you to access YouTube. So finding a good YouTube video might be a great way to have a great presentation aid in the comfort of your own home. You can incorporate that media anywhere you want. You can do it in the beginning, the middle, or the end, but just making sure that you find the best place for your speech. It's going to be strategic, right? And I got to give Jasmine props. Jasmine used a YouTube video. I believe it might have been YouTube, but she created it herself, and I wish I could have shared that with you. It was just a fantastic use of media, and she actually spoke over it. So it was just kind of there as in the background. It didn't have sound, and it was her own media. If you do something like that, you can do that, and it can play the entire speech as a presentation aid. So I just mean using 2 minutes of media that serves as a narrative that someone produced for your message. So keeping that in mind, but Jasmine created a great video. and hopefully maybe we can find a way to share that with you at some point. But anyway, so we're going to talk about organizational patterns today. And when I say organizational patterns, this is how you're going to design your outline to build your speech. And you have to choose one of these organizational patterns. If you read the description for this speech in the syllabus, you saw that it does require you to choose a particular type of arrangement. It's still the same Roman numeral design we've been building, but now it gives you the molding, right? It gives you the framework of how you're going to build that message. It's a great skill to take away from this class because you can use this in persuasive writing just as much as you can use it in short impromptu speeches. So learning how to build these outlines can be very beneficial to you in the long run. You must choose one of these outline designs for your speech. And what those strategies look like is we have a problem, cause, solution, which would kind of look at the cause and effect relationship between the problem, the cause, and the solution. We have motivated sequence, which is a simple structure. It's just got some pretty labeling. And I'm sure you had a chance to see it in your reading this week, but I want to go into more detail about that for you tonight. And then we have the refutation and comparative advantage design. So when you watched the Jacobson brand debate, you saw reputation and comparative advantage at work because those are debate designs. The textbook calls them the direct method. I know the textbook refers to refutation and comparative advantage distinctly, looking at refutation and then comparative advantage as a direct line of reasoning. So when you read chapter 16, you probably had a chance to look at these two different designs. I want to talk about those designs in depth for you here tonight. So let's start by analyzing a speech topic. Let's imagine, I'm going to change the word poverty. I find the word poverty to be very ambiguous here. So I want to focus on homelessness. So let's imagine that I use the more concrete idea of homelessness here for this speech design. So because homelessness in Orlando is a major issue, organizations that fight homelessness need support. And you know, I'm thinking about this, and this might be a good modification for you as well. When you're starting to think about your speech topic, I want to bring it closer to home. And when I ask students in classes, in face-to-face classes, if they see, I know we live in Claremont, I'm in South Lake, so I'm on the South Lake campus, and you might be in Leesburg or one of the other Lake County cities. But I ask them, do you see homelessness as being a problem in Claremont? And a lot of them don't. And so I find it remarkable that we should consider the problem as it is close to home. And so I will change this to be even more concrete and even more specific because homelessness is a problem in the Claremont area. Organizations like New Beginnings need our support. That's an organization here in Claremont that I really, really care about because I like the work that they do. So that would be a problem solution structure. The problem is homelessness in Claremont. The solution is supporting that organization that fights it. So that makes sense. If that's what I'm going to approach, then I'm only going to build a two-part body here. My first main point would be looking at that problem. And here I might examine the statistics. I need to prove to my audience that it is indeed a problem in Claremont, so I want to tell them who's impacted and where they're impacted. And I might even go into how they're impacted by defining what homelessness looks like. Now, homelessness can be many things. For some people, homelessness is, not having a house to live in. Maybe they're living in their cars. Homelessness could also be living with various family members or friends. Or homelessness could be living in a hotel or temporary housing. We know that in Claremont, access to affordable housing is limited. It's super expensive to live here. And so sometimes just access to affordable housing puts people in situations where they're kind of stranded and finding themselves homeless. So I would want to define homelessness in the Claremont area, and that would be looking at the problem. And then looking at how organizations like New Beginnings work would be my solution. It's a simple two-part body. The first part's the problem, the second part's the solution. Super simple, direct approach to that kind of line of reasoning. Now, I want you guys to take it a step further. If you have a problem solution, so I'm thinking Jasmine has a problem solution, we need to spay and neuter pets. That would be the solution. Bilingual education may have a problem solution. I really would want to understand how Carissa's looking at that. Grayson, looking at gender roles and the effect on children, definitely a problem solution. And then Connor, the price of college could definitely be a problem solution. But that's too simple of an approach. So let's consider how you might take this a step further. So if all of these topics fit into the parameters of problem and solution, now it's time to decide strategically, do we want to do a problem cause solution or a problem cause effect solution? This would be a 4-part body, a problem cause effect solution, where you look at the problem, you look at its causes, you look at the effects or the consequences of that cause, and then you look to solve that problem through specific actions. Now, if I was to just do a problem cause solution speech, I would take out the effects and I would just have a 3-part body. So it would be main point 1, 2, and 3. Now, obviously, not every single problem solution structure needs the causes. Sometimes we think about causes as they relate to the solutions. So if I was to talk about the causes of homelessness being access to affordable housing and limited access to high-paying jobs here in Claremont, then I can see we can definitely affect those causes in the solution. I can talk about how we can get people access to affordable housing, and I can talk about how we can get people jobs or education, right? Coming to Lake Sumter can help them get the education so they can get those jobs that can help them make a good living to where they can afford housing. So looking at the causes here could be really beneficial. It really helps to look at the solutions. Sometimes we look at the cause when we want people who have misconceptions to have a bigger, broader understanding. In fact, I had one student group, it was a group project, look at the causes of homelessness because they found out in their student survey that the majority of the people in the room felt that the causes of homelessness were the fault of the homeless. They found that most of the students in the classroom thought homelessness was caused because of drug addiction or because of alcoholism. And while they did find in their research that that was consistently a cause for a lot of people, it wasn't the major cause. In fact, they found that more people who were homeless were families. And a lot of those families, the children were suffering the most. And obviously, it's not the children's fault. So the more that they examined the causes of homelessness, the more they realized that people held certain misconceptions. And so they were able to challenge those misconceptions by looking at the causes. So it really helped the audience to feel more compelled to be a part of the solution. So here you might really want to consider, will it help me to look at the cause? Will it help me to look at the effect in order to either build the bridge between the problem and the solution, or to examine that problem fully, or to solve that problem comprehensively? So kind of thinking about that, right? That's how you would strategically decide if this is the way to go about building your speech. Now, I'm not sure where you're at, but I hope by the time we get to the end of this talk today, you have decided on which of these patterns you're going to use. So you might consider problem, cause, solution, or problem, cause, effect, solution for your speech. Let's move on. If you're not convinced that problem, cause, effect, or problem, cause, solution is going to work for you, you might like motivated sequence. I love motivated sequence. That guy there in the corner, Alan Monroe, was the inventor of the motivated sequence. He was a Purdue University instructor back early on in the 1930s. And at the time, they didn't have a public speaking program. But if you know anything about Purdue University, you probably know that they're known for engineering. And they were known for engineering back then. When Alan Monroe came on board, he wanted to help engineers to sell their products. He wanted to help them to build a persuasive speech that automatically had ethos, logos, and pathos built into it. And so he built the motivated sequence with the hope that the speaker would put the decision in the audience's hands. And he would see what the audience needed to see when he developed his message. So that's what motivated sequence aims to do. It is a problem solution structure, just like the one we examined at first, but it adds an extra component. It adds a visualization step. And even more, it is meant to be compelling because it builds that pathos. What's pathos? Pathos is emotional connection, right? The emotional connection you create with your audience. Ethos is speaker credibility, right? Logos is logical development, which is what these patterns aim to help us do, build a logical and reasonable argument. And pathos is building that emotional connection. And so Monroe knew that engineering students needed to build an emotional bond with their audience. And so he built this sequence to do that. Now I want you all to take a look at this sequence, if you can with me, just for a moment. You see it's a 5-part, at least it looks like a 5-part body, but really it's just a 3-part body. It starts with an introduction, and your introduction is still going to do the same thing your introduction has always aimed to do. It's going to grab the attention of your audience, establish your credibility as a speaker. It's going to create some common ground with you and the audience, and it's going to present your thesis, which for our persuasive speech is your claim, and preview your main points. So it still needs to do all of those things, right, that an introduction aims to do. But Mr. Monroe here decided that if you didn't really get their attention, I mean really make them want to listen, they weren't ever going to listen to you. So he calls this the attention step on purpose. It is really meant to get your audience to listen to you, kind of wake them up, right? Shake them, make them want to hear you. And this is where you bring some value to that topic. Before you tell them that they have a need, right? Remember, this is the problem from the audience's perspective. So we're looking at this as a problem when we build this part of the message, but we're making the audience see that they're a part of that problem in some significant way. So they have a need. And that need is ultimately going to need to be satisfied. And that's what the satisfaction step aims to do. So we created some cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is the disharmony between our thoughts, our behaviors, and our actions. If we realize that homelessness really is a staggering problem here in Claremont, and we're just sitting around doing nothing to solve it, that's a real problem, and it's going to create some cognitive dissonance. It's going to create some desire to want to act. And here, the idea here is that you can help bring back the harmony between thought, behavior, and action by offering satisfaction, so they can see that we can solve that problem through a practical and concise solution. So what does that solution look like? And this is where you're going to look at that solution, whether it's society, whether it's the government, or whether it's the individual, or whether it's all of the above. You can offer a practical solution that makes sense to the audience. They can see that that would work to solve this problem. And so they're going to feel better. They're going to feel better, they're going to be engaged, and they're going to feel better. And then you get to take them to the visualization step, which is where you as a speaker get to illustrate that this can indeed work, or how the world will be improved if we choose to act. So you get to illustrate the success, or you get to show them the effects of inaction, or both. You can combine those two ideas. You can show them both how we can improve the world if we act, and how the world will be benefited by that, and how, if we refuse to act or we don't do something, that the world will be impacted, and what that result would be. Now, this is a word picture, right? You don't necessarily need a visual to support this. The students ask me this all the time, and sometimes they assume that's all it is. Oh, it's a visual aid. It's not necessarily a visual aid. It's more of a word picture. You're allowing the audience, remember we're looking from the audience's perspective, to visualize that this can happen. So they're seeing the success. And then finally, Monroe says the conclusion should, and this is very important, push them to act. Tell them what they can do and make sure that it's something they can feasibly do. I'm going to jump ahead here, and this visual aid is available to you guys in Canvas. But I want to jump ahead to this action step, right? The action step is really important for all of your speeches. All of your speeches should have a meaningful call to action. Otherwise, what's the point? What's the point of telling them all of these things that need to change and how they can be a part of that change if you don't tell them how? And so every good persuasive speech should have a meaningful call to action in the conclusion. Now, don't forget, you still want to restate your thesis and summarize your ideas. You still want to leave your audience with a memorable thought, but it's really important to tell them what they need to do now. Now that they've learned all about how they should spay and neuter their pets, or how important bilingual education is, or why we need to eliminate gender roles, how it's damaging our kids, or the high price of college, how we can fix that. You need to tell them what to do, how to do it. And the best types of calls to action really get them to see that it can be done and it's accessible, right? It's something they can call their representatives, they can vote for that change, they can text to this number, right? They can sign this petition. Sometimes if it's immediate, right, make it something they can do right then and there. I've actually had a student call Marco Rubio in class. It was fantastic. We all saw how easy it was to call our congressperson right then and there. So getting them to do something and getting them to do it then is going to help it to be more viable, right? Help it to stick. I don't know about you, but I've had some great New Year's resolutions, and by February, I'm like, oh, it was too hard, or I forgot, right? Over time, it's corrosive. It stops that desire to want to act. So if you can get them to do it then and there, it's a great way to get them to act. Now, I never want you guys to do anything unethical. So you never want anybody to text to pay for something or to buy a product right then and there. That's not the right approach. You still want to be ethical. But if you can get them to have access to that information and to act immediate, you're probably going to have a successful call to action. Make sure they know how to do it and what to do. That is super important. If they don't know how and they don't know what, chances are it'll never get done. And don't forget to offer a summary or restate your thesis so they know and they can retain that information easily. All right, I've given you a whole lot of chunks of information here. We looked at problem solution, problem cause solution, problem cause effect solution, and now motivated sequence. Before I move on to the last two, I just want to check in with you. Do you have any questions for me? And I don't see a whole lot of life on the other end. I hope you're still listening. I hope you're still with me. Anyways, I will move on. But if you have questions, speak up. Type them out there on the chat box. All right, the last two are more debate style. Now, I see that topics that tend to be really controversial, that people are really familiar with, like maybe, say, for instance, the gun control debate. I mean, I think a lot of us know some of the most most widely used pieces of that argument, the gun control debate, depending on what side you're on. I know I hear students who present those ideas pretty consistently for either side. So you're pretty familiar with that debate. That tends to be a really good way to approach a comparative advantage or refutation if they're familiar with the debate. So this is the more direct approach. It's more of a debate style. And I start with comparative advantage on purpose. This is going to be a more positive approach. This is going to allow you to take a topic that maybe the audience doesn't agree with and help them to see that it is beneficial to them. And this is where you begin with the problem, or sometimes just the status quo, the way things currently are, or the opposition. So you present that opposition to them, and then you back up with reasons why your position is the better position to choose, or your course of action is the better route to choose. And so you would present the benefits for each of the points. Maybe you'll have a 3 or 4 or 5-part body here with an introduction and a conclusion, just like you've always had, and don't forget that call to action. And each one of your benefits needs to be backed with support. Typically that support is research, or it's examples, narratives, illustrations. It can be statistics, facts. It can be testimony from experts. It can be all of the above. So each one of those reasons needs to be backed with evidence to support it. That's the best way to build a comparative advantage. You also have refutation. Refutation is the opportunity to refute or dispute. It's almost like a counter argument for a well-known debate topic or a well-known or controversial issue. Once again, it's a more direct approach. And here you would start again with the status quo or the opposition, and you would present the challenges of that opposition. And you would be sure to present what you're proposing we do instead, right? So they can see that we have a better course of action, and these are the challenges with the current course of action, or what my opponent or my opposition would have you think. And just like with comparative advantage, each one of those premises, is what we call them, would need to be backed with support. or research. We saw Jacobson and Brand do this. They did more refutation of one another's argument than they did the advantages of their own. In some ways, I think that wasn't the best approach, but they did spend a lot of time refuting or disputing one another's position. Now, I can tell you from experience that you can interchange these two different designs. You can't do that with your motivated sequence, and you can't do that with problem cause solution. Those stand as they are. But with comparative advantage and refutation, you can decide strategically if you're going to present the benefits and you're going to refute or oppose the other argument. And you can build that into like a 5 or 6 part speech body. So developing that argument, these are pretty interchangeable. You still got to start with that introduction. You still have to end with a solid conclusion with a call to action. But comparative advantage and refutation tend to work really well together. All right, so I went through the 2 more debate style designs. So today I've talked with you about problem, cause, effect, solution, or a cause and effect relationship. We looked at motivated sequence, and we looked at refutation and comparative advantage. I'm wondering, are there questions? You guys are being kind of quiet out there in cyber world. Do you have any questions for me? Are you still listening, I hope? You didn't turn the PC on and walk away. And here's what I want to ask now. Now that I got your attention, okay, you take your time, Gracie. You're fine. You take your time. You keep those questions coming. But now that I've got your attention, I am going to ask you to answer a question for me. So I asked you when we started what your topic was. Now, if your topic's changed, which I hope it has, and I hope you're still happy with your topic, that's good. But if it's changed, you need to tell me here. But I also want to hear what pattern of arrangement you are choosing to use for your topic for this speech. So just share that with me here. And that's your quiz for tonight. Which pattern are you going to use? And you can talk too. Don't forget, you still have a mic and you're welcome to use it if it's working for you.
Okay, this might be a bit easier. This is Grayson.
Hey, Grayson.
So I want to do problem, cause, solution, and I have it as a 3-body structure. But my cause section is looking a bit more like an effect section. Like I discuss the problem of gender roles, the effect it has, and then the solution for it. Is that not correct?
Well, so what I see there, so I like so I can see why you're not necessarily looking at the causes.
Right.
But I wonder if the problems help to represent some of the causes too.
Exactly. Like the cause is definitely wrapped in there with them, but it's not it doesn't have its own designated section. So would that be acceptable?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Now, motivated sequence could work too, because that visualization
Right.
step could look at the effects. And
Right.
you might find that that might even flow a little bit better for you.
Okay.
I was thinking when I saw it that you might like the motivated sequence.
Mm-hmm.
Where motivated sequence, the visualization step can be the effects of this problem. It can be, if we keep going this way, I mean, this is what it looks like. This is what the effects are. So you can definitely do that. But I'm fine with you doing a problem effect solution. I think that will be okay too.
Okay,
That's what you've got
awesome.
built. So Jasmine, you're saying cause and effect, and so that would be a problem cause effect solution. Don't forget, you still have to build the problem as your first main point. Cause would be second, effect would be third, and solutions would be fourth. So you have a 4-part speech body with an introduction and conclusion. So you could definitely do that for this topic, and I think that would work really, really well. For sure. Now you could just do problem cause solution too, because if you look at the problem like pet overpopulation, you could talk about the causes, right? And then you could bring up the solutions. But that's up to you. I think problem cause effect solution is really helpful. And then Connor is looking at problem cause effect solution for the price of college. Do you need to have the effects, Connor? And I'll let you think about that for a minute, but are you talking about the long-term lasting effects it would have on, say, the student maybe who has to go into debt, that kind of thing? I just want to kind of wrap my head around your argument a little bit. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm in debt forever. And, a lot of us feel that way. So, yeah, I think you could totally look at the financial stress for sure. Okay, so then Carissa is using, and you're using, that's near and dear to my heart, Carissa. You are using motivated sequence for bilingual ed, and I think that is a perfect approach. Now, I'm assuming you are an advocate for bilingual education, correct? And I hope I'm not
Yes,
saying.
I am an advocate for it.
Okay. Oh, perfect. Okay, yes,
Yeah.
because motivated sequence is going to help motivate and inspire your audience to see it from your perspective. And it also gives them a goal. And I think when you empower people with, you give them a solution and then you give them something to do, they're going to be more likely to be a part of that solution. So I think you've got a great topic.
Yeah.
For sure.
And I also had another question.
Sure.
So my parents, they're also bilingual. So can I talk about like a personal experience of how they, like how it shows how having a bilingual education is helpful in the U.S.?
Absolutely, of course. But I do think you
Okay.
could maybe even build that strategically into your attention step, because you still got to build an intention getting technique or even into your visualization step. But as you're kind of developing it, that's great pathos. It's great ethos because you've got experience and you've seen firsthand. So you've got that there. So wherever you put that is up to you, but I think it would work really well. Kind of, sort of setting the stage for where you're coming from if you were to use it at the very beginning of your speech.
Okay, thank you.
So any other questions for me? So you guys were easy. Like this was easy stuff. You knew what you wanted to do and you knew right away what kind of pattern you wanted to use. And I think that's fantastic. Now the hard part, right? You've got to post that draft tonight. But remember, don't forget that it doesn't have to necessarily be a draft of your outline yet. You can read over the prompt for the discussion and you might even use it to survey your audience. So that's something too, because there's 3 questions that you can ask to get some more information from your classmates if you like. So you can use that discussion board in a few different ways. So you take a look at that. But I do want to see your drafts by Sunday, and I'd like to see as much as you can have developed in them as possible. And I'll try to give you some great feedback. But at this time, unless you have questions for me, you are free to go. And I'll stick around here for anybody that wants to ask any questions. But I really do appreciate your time. I'm so glad you took the time to meet with me tonight, and I hope you found it beneficial to do this. I really do. But I want you guys to be set up for success. I want this to be your best speech yet. And so I hope that you found this to be helpful. And
Thank you. Professor, this is Simone.
Hi, Simone. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. I was on, but I was driving. I'm so sorry. And anyways, for my speech, I'm going to do the homeschooling,
Okay.
and I saw the motivated sequence, but then I saw you show the slide with the comparative advantage. So I was thinking the comparative advantage would be a good setup for me for doing that.
Sure. Hang on, I just want to say bye, everybody. I see you guys writing me some nice thank yous, and I appreciate your time too. All right, so yes, I do think that for homeschooling, if you want to look at the advantages of homeschooling, I think comparative advantage is really a good way to go. My concern is, does your audience know enough about homeschooling, or do you have to spend some time exploring what homeschooling is? If you have a pretty knowledgeable audience, then you can just present the advantages, the advantages, the advantages. Do you think that's good?
Well, based on my questions, because I post my questions to the discussion board I think on Monday night, and I've gotten some feedback. So there are some children, well, not children, some classmates who have gone through homeschooling.
Oh,
So
perfect. Yeah.
I mean, I did that with my daughter I didn't put her into formal schooling until she was 5 because I didn't want to do daycare and stuff like that. So, and that was something that I was researching for my child personally. So,
For sure. I think most people are familiar with at least the concept of homeschooling. You might have to fill them in a little bit, and you can probably do that when you're talking about the advantages. I don't see that it should be a major concern, but I do like comparative advantage for something that literally is about improve,
right, it's
improving
one
the
or
lives
the
of.
other, right,
Yeah, it's
right,
literally about
right,
benefits. There's benefits, benefits, benefits. And if that's what you're
right,
seeing. Now, you don't want to
right.
deny that there, are some challenges. If you are familiar with some challenges of homeschooling, you can offer that as well. If not only to offer, a little bit of a counter argument. So you might say,
Okay.
well, I do understand that there are these limitations, and maybe homeschooling
Right.
isn't for everyone. There are still
Everybody.
so many advantages to it. Do you see what I mean?
Right. Right, absolutely. And then I'll have like some statistics to back that up because there are a lot of options for homeschooling. It's not just like public school or oh, another question that I wanted to ask you about that too. Should I just focus on homeschooling versus public schooling,